So, the keenly anticipated autobiography of former Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, Speaking My Mind, is going to be released in the coming week, and there are extracts in the Sunday Independent this weekend. I'm joined by the political editor of the Sunday Independent, Mary Regan, who's got a sneak preview of the book. You've read it in its entirety. Speaking My Mind, he does go into some detail on particular controversies over the course of his career. In particular, the Leo the Leak, which, by the way, he calls it that in the chapter heading is Leo the Leak. This was the leaking of an agreed government contract with GPs, which he ultimately provided to a friend of his who was a representative in a rival GP organisation separate to the one that the government was negotiating directly with. And when that came out, there was a massive public furore. Leo Varadkar had to apologise. There was a Garda investigation. He gives some insight into his views on why that controversy went on so long, and also the Garda investigation aspect.
Yeah, that was, that was really such a huge part of his political trajectory, the Leo the Leak controversy. And again, it touches on that mixing of his social and personal life with the professional life in some ways, because Matthew O'Toole was a friend. Both Leo and Matt knew him. Leo claims that he kind of exaggerated the nature of their friendship, but he obtained documents from Leo Varadkar, which was a GP contract with another GP rival organisation. And according to Leo Varadkar's version of events, he sort of exaggerated the access he had to Leo Varadkar. And this was investigated by Garda, and he gives an account of where he's sitting in the Garda station being questioned by Garda. They got their hands on his phone and they were looking through all his phone records, and he was really uncomfortable with this. He said, he was thinking of all the, silly jokes he had shared with Matt, or all the pictures of, nights out or drinking wine with his friends. And he was uncomfortable, and he referenced in that the fact that two previous Garda commissioners had lost their phones, and Martin Callan and Noreen Sullivan. But, there was no public criticism of them having lost their phones at particular times. Whereas he said if he had lost his phone as a politician, everyone would read something into this. But in the end, I don't think there was any great sort of acceptance of responsibility for what happened with that leak. Rather, he blames, he makes a sort of comment about the Gardaí, and he says in his darker moments, he wonders if the length of the investigation and how long it took for his name to be, cleared, and for the guards to decide not to pursue this or not to press charges. And he says he wonders in his darker moments if this was anything got to do with his standing up for and his defence of Garda whistleblower Maurice McCabe in earlier years when he was a minister, and that is dealt with in another chapter.
The book is very gossipy, it's very colloquial. If Leo likes somebody, they get praise. If Leo doesn't like somebody, he makes it abundantly clear. And somebody who goes through that arc of having a good relationship to a bad relationship with Leo Varadkar is Phil Hogan. And he talks about the Golfgate controversy and Phil Hogan's resignation as a European Commissioner. But he does give us some insight of what was going on at his end during all that.
Yeah, and as you said, lots of sort of real, put down comments at people in this book. I mean, at one point he talks about Joan Burton arriving late to meetings in her red coat. That really irritated him. But in terms of Phil Hogan and Golfgate, Leo Varadkar was, I think, planning to go on a retreat for a bit of relaxation.
Install Abbey,
as advised by Mary McAleese, I think it was, when Golfgate happened. I think he got a text from Simon Harris when the story broke in the Examiner saying, this is going to be huge, and you can just see Simon Harris sending this message across. The next morning, Derek O'Leary, the Fianna Fáil minister, was resigned, basically, live on radio, more or less. I remember covering it at the time. And attention then very quickly turned to Phil Hogan. Phil Hogan was someone who had advised Leo Varadkar in the past, who was a confidant, previously.
Yeah, notably points out that when he was taking over as Taoiseach from Enda Kenny, and Phil Hogan was already gone to Brussels as European Commissioner his first term, he basically says, Phil was advising him on the strategy and how to deal with people. So there was a distinct relationship there between the two.
Yeah, and you could see that earlier on in the book, Phil kind of pushing him into the Fine Gael leadership position and helping him along. Then Phil, I think, may have wanted some payback. It doesn't reference that, but Phil Hogan felt that there was no one in Dublin standing up for him on that particular day when the Golfgate story broke. But and he was right. If Leo Varadkar was not backing him, Neil Martin certainly wasn't backing him. Then he references the interview that Phil Hogan did on RT with Tony Connolly, saying, Leo Varadkar was watching this thinking, does he compares it to P. Flynn's, infamous appearance on the Late Late Show back in 1999. I think P. Flynn, Fianna Fáil EU Commissioner at the time, and he said, is this Phil Hogan gone native altogether? This great strategist,
Has he lost his touch?
has he lost his touch and lost being in touch with the Irish public opinion? Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin both pressed upon Phil Hogan that he needed to, consider his position. I think he was digging in, but then, eventually Phil Hogan did step down as EU Commissioner. But there seems to be some bitterness there, hasn't ever quite been resolved, and he says the two of them haven't been on speaking terms.
Yes, it's very blunt. We are not on speaking terms. That's it. It's like it's as if they haven't spoken since that day.
And also, he doesn't seem to bother him that much. The relationships in this book are by and large sort of these transactional relationships in the world of politics when everything is fair game.
Leo Varadkar does detail an incident that, to be fair, people will remember it, but he also says it wasn't spoken about much publicly. And this was just before he comes back for his second time as taoiseach to take over from Micheál Martin. There's a video emerges of him in a nightclub.
This was something of the unspoken thing in Irish politics for so long, the elephant in the room of Irish politics. He went into Mother Nightclub, which used to be Lillie Bordello's in Dublin, famous enough spot, and usually his Garda protection would kind of go into a club with them or be around, but he kind of said to them, you're grand, stand outside, and he was having a grand old night. And we don't really know how he ended up, but he ended up kissing a guy in the club, and someone caught this on camera. But the way it's treated in the book is very sort of nonchalant. He doesn't really seem to see it as a big issue. He writes about it in the context of how gay clubs should be safe spaces, for people, because people in those clubs mightn't be out to their communities or their friends, their families, and videos are kind of off limits. But that video went viral, and then we get an insight in the sort of conversations he had with Matt around it. And Matt's main concern was, this is an invasion of privacy. This is your personal life. And no one will really blame you for it, or no one will care. No one is interested in your personal life. Whereas Leo Varadkar felt, this is going to be really, potentially damaging. But he never really goes into the damage that it probably did him, in the sense that he became taoiseach then, and there was just a sense that while no one wanted to sort of comment or publicize his private life, people saw him as taoiseach first and foremost, but there was this sort of pull again between the level of the office of taoiseach and also him still wanting to sort of have this social life and do all the things that his peers were doing. So he deals with it in the book, but I think there's a feeling there that he didn't, really quite recognize that, almost the entire country had in one way or the other seen this clip being shared on social media accounts. He doesn't even contemplate whether it might have affected him politically or not, or affected him within his party. He just sees it as something that was wrong, an invasion of privacy, and shouldn't have happened.
Right, Regan, thank you. You can read those extracts from Leo Varadkar's book, Speaking My Mind, in the Sunday Independent.